So in this video we're going to take a look at Christian Truthers. I don't know if you know this channel, but they are a known what's called a Torah observer, almost Hebrew roots kind of guy, but he still claims the Christian sort of beliefs and title. So recently he's made 4 videos attacking the Apostle Paul, and his position nowadays is that Paul should be thrown out of the Bible and that it's not inspired scripture. So what Justin has gone and done when he's chosen this path is he has put himself among Muslims with a lying spirit in them. And why do I say that? Well, that's because Muslims also reject Paul. Muslims don't believe the writings of Paul to be properly called a corruption but as a forgery, and they believe that any subsequent inspiration from Jesus after his ascension to be forgery, and these includes all of the writings of Paul. So the Gospels, according to Mark, Matthew, Luke and John, contain some of the teachings of Jesus, but they are not the Injil, and that is Arabic word for the Gospel. So why do Muslims hold this position? Well, because they have to either lie about their faith or they have to leave it. This is the Islamic dilemma. You see, because the Christian scriptures refute the Islamic Quran, so in order to remain in the faith of Islam, Muslims have to lie to themselves and to others in order to make the religion make sense. And this is who Justin has grouped himself in with his latest 4 videos attacking Paul. And what you're going to see in this video is that not only is Justin wrong, but the Muslims are wrong as well for rejecting Paul as inspired scripture. And we're going to use the Quran to refute them both at the same time. And in later videos I'll use the Bible, but for now we're going to use the Quran to refute Justin's position and the position of Muslims who have to lie in order to remain in the faith. And that is exactly the reason why Justin has to reject Paul, because he has to envelope himself in this lie in order to remain in his theological position of the Old Covenant, the Torah observance. By the start of the 2nd century, the term gospel was used by the early church to refer to the 4-fold gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Noted scholar F.F. Bruce explains, quote, "At a very early date, it appears that the 4 Gospels were united in one collection. They must have been brought together very soon after the writing of the Gospel according to John. This 4-fold collection was known originally as the Gospel, singular, not the Gospels in plural. There was only one Gospel narrated in 4 records, distinguished as according to Matthew, according to Mark and so on." About AD 115, Ignatius, Bishop of Antioch, refers to the Gospel as an authoritative writing, and as he knew more than one of the 4 Gospels, it may well be that the Gospel, he means the 4-fold collection which went by that name. Bruce goes on to cite another church father, quote, "By the time of Irenaeus, who, though a native of Asia Minor, was Bishop of Lyon in Gaul about AD 180, the idea of a 4-fold gospel had become so axiomatic in the church at large that he can refer to it as an established and recognised fact, as obvious as the 4 cardinal points or the 4 winds. For as there are 4 quarters of the world in which we live, and 4 universal winds, and as the church is dispersed over all the earth, and the gospel is the pillar and base of the church and the breath of life, so it is natural that it should have 4 pillars, breathing immortality from every quarter and kindling the life of men anew. Whence it is manifest that the Word, the architect of all things, who sits upon the cherubim and holds all things together, having been made manifest to men, have given us the gospel in 4-fold form, but held together by one Spirit. Hence, to a Christian living at the time of Muhammad, The term gospel meant the fourfold collections found in our present day Bibles. And as an additional point, which Torah observers are bound to love this one, the Gospel of Jesus is not a book, but the good news that God sent his Son into the world to atone for sin and make reconciliation between God and man. Hence Jesus is the living gospel sent to the world. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John are not 4 different gospels, but 4 different perspectives on the one gospel of God, revealed in the person of Christ. The authors, writing under inspiration, gave mutually complementary, not contradictory, material on the life and passion of Christ. This multiple attestation serves the purpose of fulfilling the requirement of the Mosaic law that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses the matter shall be established. Deuteronomy 19:15. The Quran affirms the Torah that was available at the time of Muhammad and the gospel in usage at that time. And when the Quran talks about the Torah, it doesn't just mean the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And we know this to be true because of the hadiths, which mean authentic sayings of Muhammad. And in one of these hadiths, they talk about the description of God's messenger given in the Torah. And so what they do is they quote Isaiah 42, verses 1 to 3, and verses 6 to 7, and they say that this is a description from the Torah of Muhammad. But you and I know that Isaiah is not part of the first 5 books that would be referred to as the Torah. So when the Quran says Torah, it means the whole Old Testament. And when the Quran says the Injil, the Gospel, it means the 4-fold Gospel. So let's take a look what it says in the Quran. Surah 7, verses 156 to 157. And I will write down my mercy for those who are righteous and give alms, and who believe in our signs, who follow the apostle, the unlettered prophet, whom they find written in the Torah and the gospel that is with them. So right there it is referring to the Torah, the entire Bible, and the gospel as one written work. And it's the one that's in possession that is with them. In Surah 53, verse 36, it says, Nay, he is not acquainted with what is in the books of Moses. Surah 5, verse 46 says, But why do they, the Jews, come for thee for decision when they have the Torah, in which is the command of God? Surah 5, verse 50 says, And let the people of the gospel judge by what God has revealed in it. If any fail to judge by what God has revealed, they are licentious. Surah 5 verse 71 says, Say, O people of the book, that's the Bible, you are not founded on anything until you perform the Torah and the Gospel, and what was revealed to you from your Lord. So the Quran not only confirms the Old Testament and the Gospel, but affirms the Scriptures as authoritative and that we should judge by them. The problem here for Islam is that our Scriptures refute Islam, so Muslims have a dilemma. They need to either leave Islam or claim our Scriptures have been corrupted by somebody. Enter Paul. So the Muslims use Paul to claim corruption, while their Quran actually affirms the Scriptures as authentic. The Gospels, though having 4 accounts, were regarded as one work, which would include Luke. It would make Luke have authority in writing the Bible. It would then confirm Acts as being authoritative, as he's the same author, and Acts confirms Paul as a legitimate apostle. So by the Quran standards, it demolishes Justin's position. It demolishes the Muslims' position who deny Paul. The Quran refutes Justin and affirms the Christian scriptures, all of them, because if Paul is regarded as a legitimate apostle, and that's because the Quran confirms the Gospel, which means they confirm Luke, which means they confirm Acts, which means they confirm Paul as an apostle, and so his writings must also be authentic. Something to think about for a future video. Hope you enjoyed this one. Please share the video, and I'll see you on the next one.